My name is Darcy Allen. I'm an associate professor of economics at RMIT University. And as Amy Rose mentioned, I'm on the board of the Digital Economy Council of Australia. I hope you've really been enjoying today. I've loved some of the sessions. And we're going to touch on a bunch of things that have already been in the sessions, and I'm sure will be in the next ones going forward. I've got some great panelists here to discuss this with. Before we jump into some introductions, I just want to give a little bit of context about why I think we should still be excited about panels on blockchain for government, right? So a bunch of us have been in the space for a really long time, right? I remember back in 2017, 2018, when we were talking in that supply chain stage, we were also talking about a lot of blockchain for government applications around identity, property titles. We've been talking about it for a long time, but I think today it's still really exciting to talk about this because the tech is better and it's improving. The infrastructure is getting better. There's becoming more of a public acceptance of the technology, as well as with the departments that are trying to integrate this technology. And there's also a lot of political controversy about a lot of these applications, and I think we're gonna get into that. But it certainly brings the topics right to the fore of conversation. So I've got two fantastic panelists here with me, and I'm going to ask them both to introduce themselves. We've got Laurent Lambert from IBM, and we've got Arturo Rodriguez, a co-founder of Not Centralized. Maybe Arturo, could you tell us who you are for the people who don't know, what you do, and why you're here?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Darcy. I co-founded Not Centralized and the Australian DeFi Association, and we run a venture studio in the emerging tech space, where we focus on anything that's shiny, which has been blockchain and AI for the past few years. But we've had the fortune of being part of the RBA pilot last year, for example, and then also embarked on a number of real world asset projects. So having that context, let's say, over what blockchain means for the real world has really been a focus area for us.
Fantastic. Thank you. Laurent, do you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you, Darcy, and nice to meet everybody that's joining us today. So I'm Laurent Lambert. I've been running the blockchain practice for IBM here in Australia and New Zealand for the last 3 years, but I've been in the team for the last 6. It's been an interesting journey, obviously, a massive focus on enterprise adoptions of the technology, which is the main reason why I joined IBM in 2018, and seeing the evolution of the technology, as you mentioned. The infrastructure is building up. I think we are getting to understand better what blockchain as a technology can bring to the table, the good and the bad, transparency. It's an interesting topic. Government likes it and hates it all at the same time. So I think we're going to see more coming in the future, but definitely looking forward to this discussion.
Fantastic. So we're going to cover a bunch of topics today. I want to touch on CBDCs, stablecoins, privacy, how to integrate into legacy systems, and of course, probably talk a bit about AI, because you can't have a panel these days without talking about AI at the same time. So let's jump in straight with CBDCs. I don't think you can have a conversation about blockchain and government without talking about CBDCs. People either love them or hate them, right? So on the one hand, it looks like this amazing efficiency-driven back-end tool and quite obvious. And on the other hand, they are evil tools for government control of money, and we see everything at both ends of those spectrums, at both ends of that spectrum. And that's why we're seeing governments like the US come out with executive orders banning them. And at the same time, we've got most central banks having conversations or doing trials or research in the area. I want to hear from both of you about, how do you see this CBDC landscape? Will the sort of US moves dampen this? Are we going to see a movement away from CBDCs? Where are you seeing this space heading? Whoever wants to jump in.
I'll jump in pretty easy. I can give you a bit of a rundown on what we see globally, and then maybe we can kind of narrow it down to Australia. And I think Arturo and his experience can then kind of chip in. But what we've seen as IBM is actually a lot of interest now coming from nations to kind of understand how digital money and the digitization of money itself can start playing a role into growing the economy. So it is nation states driven more than banking driven, which is quite interesting. mostly focusing on the concept of wholesale CBDC, so the plumbing beyond the curtain. I think the concept of CBDC as a tool for citizens to kind of use as money, I think, you know, it will have its limit. And like you said, it comes with bells and whistles, but also a bunch of attribute that we might not be really keen to pursue as a society. So this has as much a society discussion as it is a technical discussion. I think from a tech point of view, we understand that quite well. There's a lot of experiments being done. I mean, Arturo mentioned the work done by the RBA, and they've done a bunch of experiments there across some of those concepts. But there's stuff going on in Singapore. IBM is involved quite deeply with the European Bank and in France specifically, in the UK. So every part of the world is experimenting, trying to understand how that's gonna pan out. I'm personally more for a wholesale CBDC than a CBDC because I think it will, you know, facilitate innovation in the space, which is stable coins or, you know, the ability to generate your own, you know, tokens and then settles on the backbone.
I think it's an interesting one because the noise and the headlines that we see on the CBDC topic are mostly sound bites, and they're highly uninformed. Let's call it scares, let's say, right? Because at the end of the day, a CBDC is nothing else than a stack upgrade for a payment mechanism. And what defines if a government has overreach or not is the design of the mechanism. It's not really the upgrade itself, right? CBDCs don't exist, therefore it's hard to even know what you're scared of. The detail is really what drives the whole thing. The detail doesn't exist. I mean, if you look at the name itself, central bank digital currency, I think that most of the currency already in existence is already digital. So what we're talking about here is programmable money on a blockchain. Therefore, the entire fear aspect, I think, that many politicians have latched onto regarding CBDCs is because, you know, it's things that uninformed individuals want to listen to, and therefore, you know, it's a nice marketing ploy. At the end of the day, CBDCs in a clean, well thought through form, which still needs to be defined, is the ability for the wider economy to effectively upgrade the entire way in which we conduct commerce. And transparency versus auditability needs to be understood, right? Blockchains are about being able to audit actions. It's not about you being able to see things. And the early forms of blockchain, which we still are at, by the way, are about transparency. But it's also because we're still too, it's an industry that is still quite young, let's put it that way, in understanding how to interface with reality. We faced this in two separate occasions, while working with within the construction industry for the RBA pilot, where we realized that, look, we can try selling blockchain to people, but unless we actually have a methodology to obfuscate transactions, people will not use it. They won't buy it, right? Because nobody wants to show their margins. Same thing happens in the rental space. We just finished off, I think it was one of Australia's largest tokenization projects. And reality is that even compliance departments within these organizations wouldn't allow you to use this technology if it used the current naive methodologies of full transparency with ERC20s and so forth, unless you use them exactly where they need to be. So it's not a catch-all blockchain, just put everything on it and everything is going to be fine. It's not the way it works, right?
So back to this relationship between CBDCs, maybe wholesale CBDCs and stablecoins. Do you kind of see this? So we may have something in the back end. We may not call it a CBDC because of a lot of the marketing around this. And then is there a flourishing world of stablecoins out there that all have different properties that retail consumers are using? Is that sort of the divide as you're seeing it? We might see we don't even have to call it a CBDC. There will be some upgrade to the stack in the background, and then there will also be retail stablecoins. I mean, I'm just amazed at the growth of stablecoins. I think everyone is. It's a cliche now to say it's a killer app of crypto. What are your thoughts on that? I think that's what you were saying, Laurent.
Yeah, I mean, I think Arturo is pretty right on this. There's the fear for the moment is potentially why adoption is not growing faster. Is obviously people are still wondering how the data can be used for, and the ability to obfuscate through technology will definitely play a role in making people more comfortable, I guess, to start sharing information within the same sandpit. After that, it's hard to predict the future. I think one of the disadvantage of blockchain in the crypto space specifically is everybody is trying to do the same thing. And so you've got a fragmentation of resources and fragmentation of efforts. And so I think we're going to kind of maybe see something similar in the stablecoin where everybody's got his own stablecoins. How many stablecoins do we need? And this is maybe where regulations, as a potential roles to play, or at least having understanding that let's not make a mess out of this. After that, I think you have to look at utilities of those tokens and what they're going to be used for. I think, just try to replace money with money. So replacing the dollar as it exists, and Arturo make a good point saying it's already digitized to some extent, with another version of digitalization of the dollar. I think we were missing the whole point of the programmability of the token that then can be used to automate a lot of processes and ultimately kind of bring some innovation. Otherwise, you're just replacing, green by red, and there's no more advantage, and I don't think it will fly.
Yeah, I think that I'd like to start off with saying that there are no clear definitions of what these tokens are, right? And the three types of tokens I think that people typically discuss are CBDCs, deposit tokens, and stable coins, where these three tokens have different properties in terms of credit risk, with the CBDC obviously being the no credit risk version within the overall economy, right? So both stable coins and deposit tokens exist already. It's just that, as in they exist off-chain, right? When I put money into a CBA account, that's a deposit token, right? If I then buy, let's call it some form of a prepaid account, or prepaid FPOS or something like that, that's actually quite akin to a stable coin, because it's something that I can use to pay in multiple different places, and every one of these places is effectively taking credit risk on the issuer of that payment mechanism. Let's put it that way. What's backing the payment mechanism? So none of these things that we're actually talking about in essence are particularly innovative as concepts. They exist. We've had them in financial markets for a very long time. It's just that now we can relate to them slightly differently through a blockchain. And if I then go back to an economy with only stable coins and deposit tokens without CBDCs, we actually fall into the issue of managing risks and credit risks, right? So why do we have ESA accounts? Well, it's because banks want to transfer money between themselves so that they don't need to carry credit risk against each other, right? So in a scenario of stable coins and deposit tokens, it's a question of credit risk and amount, right? So if I, for example, am CBA and I don't want to hold ANZ coin, I need to have a CBDC if I want to make that transfer of that value exchange safe, i.e., I want to have atomic settlement, right? So if we don't have a CBDC at a wholesale level, at least, but we do have a tokenized economy, then that tokenized economy is, let's say, underpinned by old technology. So it's kind of like going back to saying, well, we have super cool tech here, but it's all running off a Cobalt mainframe, right? And that happens already, and we all know what those problems are, right?
Yes, exactly. I want to move on from CBDCs and jump into some other challenges, really, that we have when we're talking about government applications around blockchain. Laurent, you have a long history in blockchain supply chains through IBM, and one of the main challenges there is that you have to connect the physical world to the digital world, right? And maybe you put a QR code on it, or put a chip in it, or scan it somehow, or whatever, right? You're trying to get the digital asset to match the physical asset. When we're talking about blockchain applications in government, often we've got a different problem. We need the digital asset to also match the underlying, often regulatory obligations of that asset, whether it's a property title or whatever it happens to be. I'd love to get thoughts from both Laurent and maybe Arturo first on how do you think about which things could be tokenized effectively and what some of the challenges are there around tokenizing and then the underlying regulatory obligations attached to those tokens?
Yeah, so I think that there are two forms of regulatory obligations that need to be highlighted. One of them is properties, permissions, and so forth of the token itself. So, for example, if you're tokenizing a share register, then you need to have certain controls in place to ensure that a token is going to the right person in the right way, right? But that's something that can be reflected at the smart contract design level, and still you can remain compliant, right? And you can actually have a tokenized environment. The same thing happens if you're tokenizing invoices or contractual agreements, right? Even if they have monetary value. Where it becomes problematic is when there is a legal obligation for the settlement of that asset to happen, not in a specific form only, but with a specific technology, right? So, for example, if you're settling a public share or real estate or a car, you have Chess, you have Pexa, you have whoever you settle a car with. But the point is that, sure, you can tokenize it, but you're not benefiting from tokenization to its fullest because you cannot represent the transfer of token as being the transference of legal title, right?
Did you want to jump in on that as well, Laurent? I'm interested in I'm sure some of these issues have come up in supply chains as well.
Interestingly, I think I think we discussed that before, but it's about, is everything needs to be tokenized, and potentially they are, a bunch of attributes for those, whatever assets that you want to tokenize that needs to be looked at before you go down. I think the point I want to add is that the legal framework, and I know a lot of energy is being spent by DECA and a lot of people, a lot of lawyers and accountants, spending time here and trying to understand the legal framework for those assets. I think there's a work there that needs to be done. I've been involved in some project here in Australia where the legal framework was not specifically fitting. So you do spend a lot of your energy trying to see how this would work. So the law itself, does the digital native asset then become a legal tender, for example, in the case of bank guarantee, can you just use it in a tribunal and to kind of get your claim if it comes down to that? And you realize quickly that some of those laws needs to be changed. So it's probably a double effort here. It's really the, what should we be tokenizing, and is the legal framework in line with what's possible. So yeah, probably where a lot of brain power is being expended for the moment in Australia. I don't know if it's for the best. We should probably be building stuff in place of doing low type work, but unfortunately, this is also a part of living together, and it's a big change for our society to move towards that space. And I think that's also needs to make sure that the relationship between the citizens are being taken care of.
If I could just add one thing there, and I agree 100% with you, Laurent. It's a really interesting one, because the clarification that I want to make is that the upgrades, let's say, for the legal system in this case, with regards to, for example, bank guarantees, which you would know more than me, is about upgrading the way in which the specific object, being the bank guarantee, works, as opposed to needing to have an overhaul that is fitting for crypto, right? Or blockchain assets. So it's not a digital asset issue; it's an actual legacy specific issue to that instrument that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I give a small anecdote here. When we look at it, one of the things that we had to we had to be able to print the bank guarantee, because as a legal tender, you could not go with a digital native and present it to a judge. It had to be in a paper form. So you do the whole thing to digitize something and just live in the digital world, and then at the last minute you still need to create a print button so you can actually go and use it in front of a court if needed. So this is the kind of small things that create friction, and if you add too many of those, then it will stop innovation completely. And I think the countries that will get smooth framework like this will get an advantage in this race for resources, this race for capital to develop those products and solutions.
I think we can get caught up with regulating or figuring out how to regulate the new digital thing and forget about fixing the existing institutional systems, because that's what happens when you develop an institutional technology like blockchain. It's a system of rules, right? And that it conflicts with a lot of the existing rules. I want to touch on privacy and transparency because it came up before. So in almost every government use case we talk about, there's concerns about privacy very quickly, and for good reason. Some of them are overblown, but there are reasonable reasons to be concerned about privacy. Arturo, how do you think some of these privacy concerns might be resolved? Are you optimistic about privacy technologies like zero knowledge proofs? Or how do you think we're going to navigate this privacy space? Because I think it looks a lot better now than it did sort of 5 years ago, just with the other tech that's developing on the side.
Yes, I am very optimistic, and I do agree with you that there are many technologies that we're starting to learn how to use, like ZK proofs, that not only allow us to achieve privacy in where we think privacy should be, but it also allows us to find even safer ways to achieve the purpose, which is data sovereignty and security over that data, right? So when the reason I say this is because every single technology that is, let's call it foundational, like for example, blockchain allows us not only to represent our old ways, but it allows us to change and evolve our thinking over what the problem is that we're actually trying to solve, right? And that's why I'm really, really excited, because it's not like we have a good way of dealing with privacy today, right? Privacy has been an issue long before crypto, long before blockchain. And pardon my French, but it is an actual shit show when you look at all the things that are happening around, in other industries with regards to how our data is moving around, right? So again, it's not a blockchain problem. Blockchain, well used with new technologies, could actually be a solution for these issues that we're facing.
Laurent, did you want to jump in, or we can jump and talk about AI, whichever you like?
Maybe I'll help you here. I was going to make the merge here between data and AI, and which I think it's really linked to this. But I mean, first, to address what Arturo just said, we have become very used to give our data for free because we never really thought about it. So if you have a Facebook account and it's free, while your data are the payment to some extent, and they're using to retarget you for advertising and all kind of shenanigans that we've seen over the last decade. But I think this issue with data and the privacy of it and the ownership of it is going to get way worse as AI is going to start developing. All the data you've put in on the internet has already been used now for training large language model, and then as we go down this rabbit hole, and reality and the virtual world start blurring those boundaries, I think we're going to get into a point where having control of that data, your data, is going to be critical for us as societies to be able to function correctly. So the merge of blockchain and AI, I think, is inevitable, just because blockchain will bring that level of trust that you need, and if you lay on top the ability to exchange data without exchanging data, so to validate the data without having to give it to anyone, I think so. ZK Snark type stuff, you will end up with a situation where you can remain in control of your data and still participate. So obviously very early days, but yeah, we see that already happening. IBM spent a lot of time in the AI space as framing government's model for large organizations, so they know how the data is being used, where it's being used, and by whom. And that's becoming a critical point, I think, for everyone. And government specifically will probably be at the middle of that.
Arturo, what are your thoughts on AI, crypto, the convergence?
I think I think that if you look at it from the point of view of the end user, the value is, or rather, the point of adoption as a rule of thumb is, does this thing, whatever this thing is, make my experience 10 times better, right? And most people will not care if it's blockchain or if it's AI or whatever it is. What they care about is the service or that final experience, right? Now, blockchain being a back-end technology has an incredible amount of efficiencies that could even be, 100 times X, but they're not really what people care about, what they experience, right? Therefore, when you start to see the development of technologies, or rather services that use both things, right? That have an AI agent that actually streamlines what you do as an individual, and that streamlining makes you so efficient that it actually requires a form of blockchain settlement in place. Then you start to see that the adoption of, let's call it, those both things together is something that is really interesting to the overall population. And when you start going down that route, a very good example that we have is that we're currently working on an automated, or let's call it streamlined, securitization process, right? Where everything is settled at the blockchain level, but it's an ecosystem play where there is an ability to delegate human oversight, let's say, to an AI agent, right? And in this case, it's really the human that is delegating their own actions to specific parts of their workflow, right? And that's that type of merge that is, it's less sexy than the futuristic Terminator view, but it's actually really, really applicable today to people, right? And that's really where I think that we'll see a lot of innovation and adoption come from, right? It's not the blockchain thing, it's not the AI thing, it's how do I issue a security and ensure that that issuance process is linked to the actual underlying payment that is generating the yield through the collateral, for example, right? It's really the solution that matters in this case.
I'm super excited about this, and I wish we could talk for another half an hour just about this topic. Laurent, did you have any final comments on that? We probably have about 30 seconds to run.
No, I agree. I love this discussion. I also feel that as we go down the rabbit hole of intelligence, artificial intelligence, and they become more sentient, potentially, those agents become their own DAO and live on the blockchain with their own consciousness potentially. So I think the future is bright. We just need to keep pushing and keep innovating.
Yeah, I mean, and then a whole bunch of regulatory things come up around what is that relationship between an agent and their principal, in the same way we're trying to figure out how to give legal recognition to DAOs. So you just have that same problem, but layers back. Amy Rose, before you start to speak over me directly, thank you so much to Laurent and to Arturo. That was great. We wish we could keep talking, but thank you very much for your time.